Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1638A, and today's date is August 14th, 2018, and the title of the episode is, The Central Bank Has Taken Its Foot Off the Pedal. We are coasting to the collapse. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, yesterday we talked about how Kim.com was saying that the dollar is going to collapse and everyone should move out of the dollar and move into gold or cryptocurrencies. And we know that there's a lot of countries out there where they are moving away from the dollar and putting their resources into the crypto market to avoid sanctions. And Venezuela is one of these countries where Venezuela right now has created a cryptocurrency called the Petro. And right now, their state-owned oil company, PDVSA, they will start using the local cryptocurrency for all of its transactions on August 20th. Now, we need to remember the central banks, they do not like the crypto market. It is way too hard to control something that is completely decentralized. And I know people are like, oh, no, it's centralized. No, it is decentralized. The only thing that's centralized right now are the exchanges. And very soon, those will be decentralized. And a central bank needs to control the creation of that currency or the coin or whatever you're going to have. They need centralization where everything comes from them. They can't have it where it's decentralized. They don't have control over it. They can't push the button, stop the button from creating currency. They just can't do it. This is why countries, this is why people, this is why businesses are looking at this, because they realize this takes the control out of the central bankers' hands. And we are seeing the beginning stages of this. And this will move forward as the fiat system dies. Now, is gold and silver important? Of course it is. Gold and silver has been around for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, many people think like, oh, you can either have one or the other. No, that's not true. You can have both. Cryptocurrencies is a form of transacting on a low level. Gold is retaining your wealth, and this can be used on a higher level that gives people confidence. It is backed by something. And a lot of people, think you can't have both, but you can. Now, what we're seeing here is that this entire system, it's breaking down, and we've been following all the different indicators. And we've looked in the past at the credit impulse. And China's credit impulse has been shrinking, and their shadow banking debt is collapsing. Now, the latest data show that China's credit impulse is still negative and remains at the lowest level it has been for 2 years. Now, people say, what are you talking about? What is the credit impulse? Well, the credit impulse is a term coined by Michael Biggs, then economist at Deutsche Bank, when in 2008 he defined it as the change in new credit issued as a percent of GDP. Now, when we look at the credit impulse, we can see that it has been declining for quite a while. It's been in the negative territory. And a lot of people look at this and say, well, if it's in the negative territory, everything must crash. Well, that's not exactly true. When the credit impulse turns negative, it's very similar to taking your foot off the gas pedal. Now, you're moving forward at, let's say 60 miles per hour. You take your foot off the gas pedal. Does your car come to a complete stop? No, it does not. What does it do? It rolls forward for a period of time. The central banks right now, they are taking their foot off the gas pedal. And we're starting to see certain things happen. The credit impulse is declining. We're starting to see real estate implode on itself. Retail is a complete and utter disaster. The job situation, even though the numbers show us that we're at full employment, is absolutely ridiculous. We have a lot of part-time people. Wages are declining. The Fed now is unwinding, and they've taken their foot off the gas pedal. Now, we were going at a certain speed, and since the central bank took their foot off the gas pedal, we are going to coast towards a collapse. That is what has been happening. And a lot of people think, well, if they just start to unwind, if they just start to do this, we should hit the collapse right away. No, what happens is we were moving at a certain speed. They were pumping everything up. Now they've stopped. Now everything's starting to decline the opposite way. Now they were trying to push this forward and accelerate the process with raising interest rates and pushing this entire system to the edge. Now we both have the central bank and the patriots fighting this out on who's going to control the narrative. On the other hand, we see there are countries, they're moving away from the dollar. Now, a lot of people think, well, China needs to have the reserve currency, and once their reserve currency is set up, then the dollar will collapse. Not necessarily, because as we can see, Russia and many other countries, all they have to do is turn towards their own currency, which they've been doing. Now, think about this for a second. And Lavrov actually even said this, that the U.S., with their gross misuse of the dollar, will lead to its weakening and force a switch to other national currencies. If countries lose faith and believe the United States is misusing the dollar for nefarious purposes and placing sanctions on countries, starting wars, which they've been doing for a very long time, this has been the deep state, countries, all they need to do is dump the dollar and go to their national currencies. And they don't even have to use their national currencies. Some other countries, like we've been seeing with Venezuela, and there's going to be certainly others, they might even switch to cryptocurrencies, and they can deal in cryptocurrencies. Some countries might use gold. The point is, for the dollar to collapse, we don't have to have a collapse of the economy. We don't have to have China say we are the reserve currency. The world, all these different countries, all they have to do is say, you know something? We don't like what the U.S. is doing with the dollar. We don't like the pressure they're putting on different countries. They've been doing this for a very long time, and we're going to start using our national currencies. Russia, China, India, Syria, Iran, Egypt, you name it, Venezuela, Brazil, Argentina, and the rest of the world. All they need to do is then use their national currency. The EU, countries will look at this and say, you know something, why are we using the euro? We don't need to use this anymore. Let's use our national currencies. The euro completely falls apart. The euro, the dollar, this is all part of the central banking system. And we can see the call to move away from the dollar is already out there. And for a lot of countries, they can easily do this. Actually, the African nations are already saying there's no reason, and these are all the emerging markets down in Africa, there's no reason to use the dollar. We deal with China. We deal with the yuan. Why do we use the dollar? Why do we keep it in reserves? There's no reason for it. To purchase oil, countries can use the Petro yuan, or they can use gold, or with Venezuela, they can use a cryptocurrency. And you can see how quickly everything starts to fall apart. Now, once countries stop using the dollar and they're starting to use their national currencies, they don't really have to keep the dollar in reserves. There's no reason for it. I mean, we can see that Russia, China, they're dealing outside the dollar. India is dealing outside the dollar. Iran is dealing outside the dollar. Venezuela is dealing outside the dollar. All these countries are dealing outside the dollar. Yes, in some fashion, they're still using the dollar, but it's very easy to switch. And I know a lot of people think, well, this is a very difficult thing and it will take a lot of time to switch. Not really. I mean, think about how quickly everyone got on board with the dollar in the 70s to pay for oil. It's because they were forced to do it. If they were forced to move the other way, guess what? They will do it. And once this happens and these countries don't have the dollar in their reserves, where do those dollars go? They come back to the U.S. If they come back to the U.S., we see hyperinflation. What happens to the economy here in the United States? It collapses. So there's many ways for the economy to collapse here in the United States, throughout Europe. And again, this is the central banker's economy. This is an economy that needs to be crashed one way or another. And if one plan doesn't work, they will resort to a different plan. Now, when we look at this and we can see all the different sanctions and all the pressure being put on all these different countries, it seems like they might be doing this on purpose, just like pushing the central bank to raise rates. And it looks like they have plan after plan to make sure that this system comes down. That's the whole point of this, is having the system come down to get out of the central banking system. Now remember, before, their entire push was to move to war and have the war mask everything else that was going on, because the central banks, the deep state, they had full control of what was going on, and they were ready to move to a brand new system. There was no way out of it. And we could see that this was their plan before, and they were going to have the TPP and the rest, where they can control all the countries, and most likely once after this event that occurred, they would usher in a new system. And it looks like they were going to make the entire world use this system and not have all these different currencies. Because when you are diversified throughout the world and you have all these different national currencies, very difficult to control. You have to have a central bank in each place. You have to manage the country. You have to put them into debt. If you have one currency, the central banks, well, it's centralized. It's much easier to control all these countries. They don't like countries having their own currency. If they have their own currency, it's a little bit difficult to control. Think about the euro, where all the countries in Europe, most of them signed on to this. Well, they have the ability to control all these countries. They can put them into debt. They can make them, push austerity on the people. They can make them pass certain laws. They can bribe certain individuals in government to go along with this agenda. And this was the beginning stages of it all. But as we can see, everything is changing right now. Countries now are looking at their national currencies. They're saying, you know something? It's more important that we use our national currency. It's more important than having the euro. It's more important than anything else. Because when you use your own currency and you're not dependent on a reserve currency, you can control your country a lot better. Remember, the central banks don't like this. They don't like others having control because they want full control. When I say they, it's the central bank. And how do they control the world? Well, they were doing it through sanctions. This was coming out of the United States, the deep state. Because everyone used the dollar, it was very easy to place sanctions on these countries and to try to control the world in this fashion. When countries started to move away from the dollar, and maybe they wanted to sell oil using something else, well, force was used to push them back on the dollar and say, no, you will transact with the dollar, you will sell all the oil using the dollar. Everything is changing right now. And we can see already with Russia saying that, listen, it's time to move away from the dollar. It's time to use the national currency. There's no reason to have the reserve currency. We have other means of paying for oil, other means of transacting. We have other payment systems. We have other exchanges. We have everything set up in other places. There's no reason to continue on with the system the way it was. This way, if we move away from the system, the central bankers, the deep state, they lose control. And it looks like this is the push, as we can see it, that one way of getting rid of the central banks, one way of getting rid of the deep state, is to have every country go back to their national currencies. Don't depend on a reserve currency. Pay for oil using everything but the dollar. Any other currency, cryptocurrency, gold, silver, doesn't make a difference. And we can see that this is a very big push right now. And it looks like Russia, along with China, along with the United States, the push is to get rid of the central banks. And I believe these countries are working together. Remember, Putin took over the private Western central bank. He's calling the shots in his country right now. I believe Trump is going to be doing the same thing. And I think all of this together is the move is to try to push out the central banking system. Yes, it's not going to be good times for many people, many of the countries, because there's going to be an adjustment period, a transition period where it's going to be very, very difficult. And the debt that we've known for a very long time and the dollar that we've used for a very long time, well, the value is going to continually decline. And eventually it's going to probably get so bad that no one would even want to use the dollar because of inflation, which means it takes a lot more dollars to buy the piece of merchandise. And we can see right now with the credit impulse at a negative area for a very long time now. It's not just like the last month or so. It's been there for quite a while. It means that the central banks, they've taken their foot off the gas pedal. We're coasting towards the collapse. They've been trying to push this agenda by speeding it up with raising interest rates, unwinding. And again, we have both sides now fighting for the narrative for when this system comes down. So get ready, get prepared, because we are headed in this direction. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.